Good morning or good afternoon, 7th graders. This is Mrs. Rains, and I'm going to lead you through a lesson about quotation marks in the English Workshop book. And so I need you to get out a highlighter and a pen or a pencil and be ready to work through the lesson with me. And I'll give you a moment just to get out your pencil pouch and prepare. Okay, I need you to turn to page 281 in your books, and I'm going to lead you through the rules about quotation marks, and then we're going to do a little bit of practice. Then we're going to cover a few more rules and do a little bit more practice. So you have to follow along and listen carefully. All right, on page 281, we begin at the top where it reads rule number 21C. All right, please highlight 21C and then the rule. I'll read the rule and you highlight. Use quotation marks to enclose a direct quotation, a person's exact words. Here's an example. Quotation mark, wait here, comma, quotation mark, said the officer, comma, quotation mark, until the woman with the flag waves you on, period, quotation mark. Now, it may seem a little irritating that I, mentioned there were commas and periods, and I paused long enough to read those in that sentence, but I wanted you to see where they were. Okay, now let's look at the next rule. All right, highlight Rule 21D. A direct quotation begins with a capital letter. Let's look at the example. Shane said, comma, quotation mark. Now notice that the T is capitalized. The earlier arrowheads were larger than the latter ones, period, in quotation mark. Okay, now let's highlight rule number 21E. When the expression identifying the speaker interrupts a quoted sentence, the second part of the quotation begins with a small letter because it's just a continuation of that one sentence. For example, quotation mark, the clay, comma, in quotation mark, said Kelly, comma, quotation mark, comes. Now that just continues the sentence. The clay comes from, and then you continue on. So that's why it's a lowercase c. So it reads, the clay, said Kelly, comes from an area near the bottom of the cliffs. The next part of the rule, when a second part of a divided quotation is a sentence, it begins with a capital letter. So let's look at this next example. Look at this, comma, quotation mark, said Mr. Park. Look at this is a complete sentence. It has the implied subject you look at this, the predicate, the simple predicate look. So that is a sentence all by itself. Then you begin the next part of the dialogue, and this is in quotation marks as well. It's a new sentence. So the next new sentence is, it is a piece of amber. So that's why this particular part is capitalized. It is capitalized in this second part of the quotation because it's a new sentence in the quotation. All right, let's now highlight Rule 21F. A direct quotation is set off from the rest of the sentence by a comma, a question mark, or an exclamation point, but not by a period. Okay, so let's look at the examples. Quotation mark, they will ask for time out, comma, quotation mark, whispered Paulini. Notice you can have a comma there. Let's look at the next example. Quotation mark, what good will that do? Question mark, quotation mark, asked Jason, period. Or it can be a question mark there. The last example, quotation mark, we won, exclamation point, quotation mark, shouted Teresa, period. Okay, now I'll highlight Rule 21G. A period or a comma should always be placed inside the closing quotation marks. Example, Quam said, comma, quote, that's a beautiful serape, period, quotation mark. I want to really emphasize that the period is on the inside of the quotation mark. The next example, quotation mark, my grandmother gave it to me, comma, quotation mark, said Flora, period. So those go on the insides of the those punctuation marks go on the inside of the quotation marks. So just be very careful to place your quotation marks on the outside of those punctuation marks. Okay, now let's highlight the rest of the rule at the bottom there. When both the sentence and a quotation at the end of the sentence are questions or exclamations, only one question mark or exclamation point is used. It is placed inside the closing quotation marks. For example, did Arthur ask, comma, quotation mark, who's in charge here? Question mark, quotation mark. All right, we're going to turn the page now. Now I would like for you to listen to the directions, and then when I'm finished reading the directions to you, I want you to pause the video and actually work through the exercise. So we are looking at exercise 3, punctuating quotations. For each sentence below, insert quotation marks and other marks of punctuation where needed, like periods or commas or exclamation points or question marks. Let's look at the example. Number 1. Quotation mark. Who was Daniel Hale Williams? Question mark, quotation mark, ask Marty, period. That's done correctly. I want you to add the correct punctuation marks as well for numbers 1 through 5. I need you to pause the video right now, and when you finish the video, then turn it back on and look and check your answers 1 through 5 and make sure you did them correctly. If you did not, I'm going to have you correct them. So right now, just do your very best. If you need to refer back to the questions, you may turn back to page 281 to do so. Okay, now that you've done number 1 through 5, I want you to check them very carefully by looking at the screen and checking your writing and making sure you know the commas are on the insides of quotation marks and the periods are. Everything's where it should be. And if something is wrong, I want you to correct it on your page. Be very, very careful doing this because this is something we're going to be using in the next few days in our writing. I'll go ahead and pause the video now as you look at the screen and check your answers, okay? Okay, now that we've practiced a little bit with those rules, we're going to practice, we're actually going to get a few more rules. There are a lot of quotation mark rules. And so on page 283, there's a whole other set of little rules, and I need you to highlight Rule 21I. When a quotation mark, when a quotation consists of several sentences, put quotation marks only at the beginning and the end of the whole quotation. For example, look at the quotation mark, and then the quote begins. Now you're galloping toward the first barrel, period. You know you're going to turn and go around it, comma, but the horse doesn't know, period. So you squeeze with your right knee, comma, quotation mark, said Ron. So you had 3 different sentences in this one quotation, stated by Ron. And so that's a great way to use quotation marks all together, especially in research writing or if you're writing a story, okay? Let's look at the next rule. Okay, please highlight number 21J. When you write dialogue, conversation, characters talking back and forth, begin a new paragraph every time the speaker changes. Now, you may think this is crazy, but if you look in some of your novels, this is exactly what those writers do. For example, Chad looked nervous as he said, "You guys are not going to believe what I saw last night. Coming home from practice, I saw this thing glowing in the sky just above the horizon." "Do you think it was a UFO?" asked Jody. Notice, change of paragraph there because now Jody's speaking. "Oh my goodness, now look, there's another change of paragraph. I don't know what it was, but it sure was strange." Now, what's nice here is you don't have to say, said, Chad. Again, when it changes paragraphs, our brain just knows the other speaker is responding, especially when there are just 2 speakers. Then if you look at the next change of paragraph, "Look," said Umeko, "let's call the state police. They'll know if anyone else reported it." When you have that third person, contributing in the dialogue, you have to state who he is. Next time you're reading, I want you to notice this in your novel, okay? Okay, now let's highlight Rule 21K. Use quotation marks to enclose the titles of short works, such as short stories, poems, articles, songs, episodes of television programs, and chapters in other parts of books. Now, I want you to remember, I'm going to stand up right now and show you this, since we're listening to this together, and show you what I mean by short with my hands. And I want you to always remember the quotation marks are for short titles, okay? Here's an example. Did she sing "Love is the Thing" at the concert? Right, now let's highlight Rule 21L. Use single quotation marks to enclose a quotation within a quotation and to punctuate the title of a short work used within a quotation. So I'm going to do something special here. I'm going to highlight the quotation marks in yellow and then the quote or the title within the quotation mark in orange. Okay, I'm going to highlight those single quotation marks in orange. Here's the example. Luna said, quotation mark, "I spoke to the principal and she said," so this is a quote within her quotation, single quotation mark. Remember that everyone has the right of free speech. And now you have to finish the quote within the quote first. And so you finish it with a single quotation mark, and then what Luann was saying, the whole thing there, is now finished as well, so you put a double quotation mark on the outside. Let's look at the next example. You start with a regular quotation mark. Have you ever read the poem? And now the poem needs to be in quotation marks, but we have to differentiate it from the original quotation mark, so we do it in a single quotation mark. Refugee in America. Then we end the title in a single quotation mark. Then we have the question mark, and then you have the quotation mark on the outside of that question mark, asked Juan. Now that's a big mess, but we're going to keep practicing those, so don't worry. Okay, now I want you to practice using some of these rules doing exercise 6. And I only want you to do number 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, and 10. So circle those right now so that you know which ones to actually do. And I want you to pause the video and to do those 6 different questions just for practice, and then after you're finished we will turn the video back on and you will check your answers. So right now circle 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, and 10, pause the video and add the punctuation where it belongs, okay? Okay, I hope you did well. Let's check your answers very carefully. Look over the 6 different answers and make sure that you carefully see where the commas are placed and where the single quotation marks are placed and any question marks maybe that are placed. And I want you to check your work very carefully so that you know exactly where these go. Then make sure you check numbers 6, 7, and 10 on the next page as well. And if you need to pause the video, you sure can at any point in time on the right page so that you're looking at the correct answers for the page that you're on. When you finish, I have one little short thing to say to you, okay? So check your answers carefully. Okay, good job. You made it through your first English video. And what I want you to remember is that we've done this one in class today, and we'll do many more in class. It's your job just to be very, very careful doing these and to never copy out of someone's book, because part of learning is listening to the explanation that I give as we're talking about the rules and maybe even looking at some of the answers. So please always just follow the video very carefully, and I hope you have a very nice day and that you've learned something. Now just know there's going to be a quiz coming up, and I hope you've learned these rules well. Thank you. Bye-bye.